First, there are gay people in the world. They are our friends and neighbors, our co-workers, our children, our parents, our family. There are gay people in the world. Second, those people find happiness in same-sex relationships. Doesn't mean you do, doesn't mean other people do, they do. Third, when they find that happiness, it does not take anything away from you. Unless you were planning on being with one of them yourself. In which case you should be glad we figured this out now. It does not take anything away from you. Giving marriage to gay people doesn't mean taking it away from straight people, any more than giving the vote to women meant taking it away from men. It's not like we have a limited number of marriage licenses and once they're gone, they're gone. Fourth, relationships are good for people. This is the kind of thing that when we're talking about heterosexual relationships, we normally celebrate it. We celebrate it everywhere from great literature to music to shows on television like The Bachelor. You can actually feel your brain cells dying as you watch that. But the show and things like that have this very important theme in common, which is that it's a wonderful thing to find that special someone. Someone to have and to hold, for better or for worse. Someone to come home to at night, to wake up with in the morning, to share life's joys and sorrows with. This is a beautiful part of the human experience, and it's good for us. It gets us outside of ourselves. In a way, it makes us better people. Fifth, marriage is good for relationships. When I listen to Maggie talk about the importance of marriage, there's a lot of what she says that I agree with, because I think that marriage is very important. It's important in a number of ways. It's important for what it does socially, because it's a way for us as a community to stand behind people and say, it's good for you to have someone to take care of you and vice versa. And we're going to support that. We're going to have certain expectations that go along with that. It's also something we do legally, creating next of kin, so that if one person goes to the hospital, the other person can visit. If one person dies, the other person can get bereavement leave, make funeral plans. If one person is not an American citizen, the other person can help get citizenship status for that person. It may not seem like a big deal to you, unless you happen to fall in love with someone who's not an American citizen. If one person is the breadwinner, the other one can be secure in Social Security benefits. If the couple gets divorced, split up, as they sometimes do, there is a system in place for how we're going to divide assets fairly. This is something we often don't think about in the marriage debate. That one of the reasons for marriage for gay and lesbian people is gay divorce. Because straight people have this nice system in place. Not nice in the sense that nobody wants to go through it. If you've been through it, you know it's not very nice. But there's a system in place to help protect you. You don't have that. I'll tell you what I have. I have a thick, very expensive binder at home. Very expensive binder. It gives me just a handful of these rights and responsibilities that you can get with a $40 marriage license. And sixth and finally, what's good for couples in this way, what's good for people in relationships, is good for society at large. This is a very important step in the argument, and I want to highlight it because I think people often make a mistake. In fact, when the initial announcement went out for this debate, it said something like, John Corvino will argue that marriage is a personal choice and therefore should be extended to gay and lesbian people. I'm here to tell you, John Corvino will not argue that. John Corvino has never argued that. Sure, in some sense, marriage is a personal choice, but it's also more than that. It's a social institution. If it were just something you did on your own at home, then fine, go home. Marry your partner. Marry your toaster, if I care. I don't care. If you marry your toaster, what are people going to get you as a shower gift? But I mean this very seriously. Marriage is a social social institution. It's about certain kinds of relationships that we as a community stand behind socially and legally and say, look, we recognize this as something special and important. We're going to have certain expectations. We're going to give you certain rights, also certain responsibilities. So if I'm going to make the case to you that we should extend marriage to gay and lesbian people, I have to explain to you why this is good for society. Not just good for gay and lesbian people, but good for society at large. And I want to give you 3 reasons why this is. First should be an obvious reason, but it isn't in the debate, which is that gay and lesbian people are part of our society. So that if something is good for them, helps them, that actually is a benefit to society because they're part of our society. We are part of society. But second, it's not just about gay and lesbian people. It's also about their friends, their neighbors, their family, the people around them. Why? Because society has an interest in promoting stable partnerships, in making it such that you have someone to take care of you so that the state doesn't have to. Among the very important things marriage does is it designates someone whose job it is to be there for you and vice versa. And that's not just good for the two of you, that's good for the rest of us. Third, there's the issue of children. We're going to talk a lot about children tonight, I expect, and I'll say a little more about children in a few minutes. But the fact is, there are some gay and lesbian individuals and couples raising children. And those children matter. Let me make this concrete for you. I'll tell you about some people I actually know. I'll tell you about my friends Tom and Dennis in Michigan. They've been raising 3 boys that they've adopted, Josh, Joey, and Raul. These were boys who did not have a family, in fact were hard to place for various reasons. And Tom and Dennis took them in, gave them a home, do the kind of things that parents do, teach them, comfort them, encourage them to stay inside and do their homework when they want to go out and play, encourage them to go out and play when they want to stay in and watch The Bachelor. Creating for them something very valuable. Josh, Joey, and Raul deserve to have the relationship of the people caring for them recognized in this way as well. They deserve married parents. And by denying marriage to gay and lesbian people, we are denying that to Josh, Joey, and Raul. So, my case for same-sex marriage in a nutshell is that it's a win-win situation. It's good for gay and lesbian couples, but it's also good for society at large, because society has an interest in making it such that there's someone whose job it is to take care of you and vice versa. That's good for the community. Now, all of that sounds wonderful, but as we know, there are many people who oppose marriage for gay and lesbian people. What are some of the objections we need to look at as we think about these people? Well, there are a number. I'm not going to be able to cover them all tonight. I'm certainly not going to be able to do justice to everything that Maggie said. But let me touch upon a few. The first one I want to talk about is religion. Because what we're talking about here today is civil marriage, something that the state does. Also something that we as a community, we as a society does. And that's different from religious marriage, what your church or other religious institution does. It's hard to separate those things in our minds in this country because typically if people want both, they do them at the same time. They don't have one wedding in the courthouse and one wedding in the church or other religious house. They do them together. That's not true in every country. My partner is Filipino. His parents had 2 weddings several months apart, one in the church and later one in the courthouse. A lot of people bring religion into this discussion and have a hard time keeping these things separate. I want to actually quote from somebody I think who did a very good job of keeping these things separate. Not with respect to the issue of marriage for gays and lesbians, but actually a different issue, the issue of divorce. He wrote, "The Christian conception of marriage is one. The other is quite different, a different question. How far Christians, if they are voters or members of parliament, ought to try to force their views of marriage on the rest of the community by embodying them in the divorce laws. A great many people seem to think if you are a Christian yourself, you should try to make divorce difficult for everyone. I do not think that. At least I know I should be very angry if the Mohammedans tried to prevent the rest of us from drinking wine." My own view is that the churches should frankly recognize that the majority of the British people are not Christians and therefore cannot be expected to live Christian lives. There ought to be two distinct kinds of marriage, one governed by the state with rules enforced on all citizens, the other governed by the church with rules enforced by her on her own members. The person who wrote this, C.S. Lewis, founder of the Socratic Club. I want to make this very, very clear. If your religion doesn't allow divorce and remarriage, state can't force it to. If your religion doesn't allow interfaith marriage, state can't force it to. And if your religion does not allow same-sex marriage, the state can't force it to. And the examples that opponents often bring up, they're not examples of us trying to interfere with religious practice. There are always cases where religions engage in the public square in other things and then run afoul of certain anti-discrimination laws. We can talk about those, but it's a somewhat different issue. So why else do people oppose marriage for gay and lesbian people? Maggie talks a lot about the fact that if we allow marriage, or we extend marriage to gay and lesbian people, those who oppose it will be labeled as bigots. I think she actually engages in a kind of double counting here. For every argument we offer, call it X, Maggie objects both to the fact that we say X and the fact that we say, and anyone who disagrees with X is a bigot. Well, first of all, a lot of us don't do that. And second, neither side has any real corner on name-calling in this debate. I've been an openly gay man for 20 years. I've been called a lot of things, including by people engaged in the marriage debate with me. I think it's important for us to stay away from that and actually focus on the substance. So what else? Well, some people think that same-sex marriage somehow threatens traditional heterosexual marriage. I'll be honest, I don't get this argument. I've been doing this for a long time. Why do people think that supporting marriage for a gay couple in any way affects marriage for straight couples? Do they think that straight couples will somehow give up on the institution of marriage? What's that dinner conversation going to look like? Well, Jane, I wanted to marry you, but now Adam and Steve are getting married, so forget it. We can and should and will support marriage for straight people while recognizing that it's not right for everyone. So what else? Well, some people say, well, if we